Commitment over compliance, creating a dynamic and engaging organizational culture. Abstract. Organizations face a critical choice in how they motivate employees, enforce compliance through rules and monitoring, or cultivate genuine commitment through engagement and shared purpose. Research demonstrates that commitment-based cultures significantly outperform compliance-oriented ones across metrics including innovation, retention, customer satisfaction, and financial performance. Yet many organizations default to compliance mechanisms due to their perceived simplicity and control. This article examines the distinction between commitment and compliance cultures, reviews evidence on their organizational and individual consequences, and synthesizes research-informed interventions for building commitment. Key strategies include transparent communication, procedural justice, capability development, autonomy-supportive leadership, and meaningful work design. Building long-term commitment requires recalibrating psychological contracts, distributing leadership authority, and embedding continuous learning systems. Organizations that successfully shift from compliance to commitment create sustainable competitive advantages while enhancing employee well-being and stakeholder outcomes. The traditional command and control workplace operates on a simple premise: employees comply with directives, follow established procedures, and avoid deviating from prescribed norms. Management sets rules, monitors adherence, and corrects violations. This compliance-oriented approach dominated industrial-era organizations and remains prevalent today, particularly in highly regulated industries and hierarchical structures. Yet something fundamental has shifted. Knowledge work now dominates advanced economies, requiring creativity, judgment, and discretionary effort that cannot be mandated through rules alone. Competitive advantage increasingly flows from innovation, adaptability, and customer responsiveness, capabilities that flourish when employees are genuinely committed rather than merely compliant. Meanwhile, workforce expectations have evolved. Employees increasingly seek meaning, autonomy, and developmental opportunities, not just steady paychecks and clear instructions. Deci and Ryan, 2017. This gap between compliance-based management and commitment-requiring work creates practical organizational challenges. Companies struggle with disengagement, with recent surveys consistently showing that roughly 2/3 of employees report feeling unengaged at work. Retention costs mount as talented individuals leave for organizations offering greater purpose and autonomy. Innovation stalls when employees dutifully follow procedures but rarely question assumptions or suggest improvements. The stakes are significant. Organizations that cultivate genuine commitment, where employees internalize organizational goals, exercise initiative, and invest discretionary effort, demonstrate measurably superior performance. The challenge lies in making the transition, moving from compliance mechanisms that feel controllable and concrete to commitment cultures that require different leadership capabilities, organizational structures, and management philosophies. This article examines the evidence base for this transition and provides practical guidance for organizations seeking to build dynamic, engaging cultures rooted in commitment rather than compliance. The organizational culture landscape defining commitment and compliance in organizational context. Commitment and compliance represent fundamentally different relationships between employees and organizations, though both can produce surface-level behavioral conformity. Compliance occurs when employees follow directives and adhere to rules primarily because of external pressures, monitoring systems, reward structures, or fear of sanctions. The motivation is extrinsic and behavior changes when surveillance decreases or incentives shift. Meyer and Allen, 1991. Commitment, by contrast, reflects internalized motivation where employees align their personal values and goals with organizational objectives. Meyer and Allen, 1991, identified three forms: affective commitment, emotional attachment to the organization, continuance commitment, perceived costs of leaving, and normative commitment, felt obligation to remain. Effective commitment proves most valuable organizationally, as it predicts discretionary effort, citizenship behaviors, and sustained performance even absent direct oversight. The distinction manifests in daily behavior. A compliance-oriented customer service representative follows the script, resolves issues within prescribed parameters, and escalates exceptions to supervisors. A committed representative adapts communication to customer needs, proactively identifies systemic issues causing repeated problems, and suggests improvements, going beyond role requirements because they care about customer outcomes and organizational success. Organizations rarely exhibit pure compliance or commitment cultures. Most fall along a continuum. However, structural choices, leadership behaviors, and system design consistently signal which end the organization prioritizes. Extensive monitoring, detailed procedures, and punishment-focused accountability systems signal compliance expectations. Transparent goal setting, autonomy over methods, developmental feedback, and shared decision-making signal commitment cultures. Rousseau. 1995. Prevalence, drivers, and distribution. Compliance-oriented management persists despite evidence favoring commitment approaches for several interconnected reasons. First, compliance appears simpler to implement. Rules provide clarity, monitoring generates measurable data, and sanctions offer clear consequences. Leaders accustomed to compliance frameworks often lack exposure to or training in commitment-building alternatives. Second, certain industries face genuine regulatory requirements demanding procedural adherence. Healthcare, financial services, nuclear power, and aviation must maintain rigorous compliance with safety and regulatory standards. The challenge lies in distinguishing necessary compliance from unnecessarily extending compliance mindsets into domains requiring commitment. Procedural adherence in medication administration versus innovation in patient communication. Edmondson. 2019. Third, organizational maturity influences approach. Rapidly growing companies often institute compliance mechanisms to create consistency across expanding operations. What begins as temporary standardization can calcify into permanent culture. Similarly, organizations responding to crises, ethical lapses, safety incidents, or financial irregularities frequently implement compliance-heavy controls that remain long after the precipitating crisis passes. Finally, commitment cultures require different leadership capabilities. Building commitment demands emotional intelligence, coaching skills, tolerance for ambiguity, and comfort with distributed authority. Many leaders reach their positions through technical expertise or successful navigation of compliance-oriented systems, leaving them underprepared for commitment-building roles. Industry distribution reflects these factors. Professional services, technology, and creative industries demonstrate higher commitment orientations, as their value propositions depend on innovation and client relationships requiring discretionary effort. Manufacturing, logistics, and financial services historically skewed toward compliance, though leading organizations in these sectors increasingly recognize commitment's competitive advantages. Organizational and individual consequences of culture orientation. Organizational performance impacts. The performance differential between commitment and compliance cultures appears across multiple dimensions, with measurable effect sizes. A meta-analysis by Ricketta, 2002, found that organizational commitment correlates positively with job performance. Rho equals 20. Organizational citizenship behaviors. Rho equals 31, and negatively with turnover intentions. Rho equals dash 56, and actual turnover. Rho equals dash 28. While correlation doesn't establish causation, longitudinal studies suggest commitment genuinely influences these outcomes rather than merely reflecting them. Innovation represents a particularly stark differentiator. Compliance cultures inherently discourage risk-taking and deviation from established procedures. While innovation requires experimentation, learning from failures, and challenging assumptions, organizations with high effective commitment show significantly more innovative behaviors and faster new product development cycles. Financial performance ultimately determines organizational sustainability. The relationship between commitment culture and financial outcomes operates through intermediate mechanisms. Committed employees deliver superior customer experiences, reducing acquisition costs and increasing lifetime value. Lower turnover decreases recruitment and training expenses while preserving institutional knowledge. Higher discretionary effort improves operational efficiency. A study of manufacturing plants found that facilities with commitment-based human resource systems achieved 22% higher productivity and 41% lower scrap rates compared to control-oriented counterparts. Arthur, 1994. Customer satisfaction provides another revealing metric. Committed employees deliver more personalized service, show greater problem-solving initiative, and communicate more authentically. Research in service industries consistently links employee engagement, a commitment indicator, with customer satisfaction scores. Harter et al. 2002 found that employee satisfaction and engagement at the business unit level predict customer satisfaction and business outcomes including profitability and productivity. The adaptability advantage may prove most critical in volatile environments. Compliance cultures optimize for stability and efficiency in predictable contexts but struggle when conditions change, as employees await new directives rather than adapting autonomously. Commitment cultures sacrifice some short-term efficiency for responsiveness, as employees exercise judgment to address novel situations without management intervention. Teese, 2007. Individual well-being and stakeholder impacts. The consequences extend beyond organizational metrics to human outcomes. Employees in commitment cultures report significantly higher job satisfaction, lower stress levels, and better work-life balance. The mechanism is straightforward: autonomy, meaningful work, and supportive relationships fulfill basic psychological needs. Promoting well-being. Deci and Ryan, 2017. Compliance cultures, by contrast, frequently generate stress through constant monitoring, limited control over work processes, and emphasis on error avoidance rather than growth. Burnout represents a critical concern. Maslach and Leiter, 2016, identified 6 organizational factors predicting burnout: workload, control, reward, community, fairness, and values alignment. Compliance cultures typically perform poorly on control, limited autonomy, fairness, arbitrary rule enforcement, and values, mismatch between stated and lived values. Commitment cultures that authentically implement autonomy-supportive practices demonstrate substantially lower burnout rates. The impact extends to physical health. Chronic stress from controlling work environments contributes to cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, and immune dysfunction. A large-scale collaborative meta-analysis by Kivimaki et al. 2012 found that low job control, characteristic of compliance cultures, predicted coronary heart disease incidence, even controlling for traditional risk factors. Organizations bear both moral and financial responsibilities for these health consequences. Career development trajectories differ markedly. Compliance cultures often create learned helplessness, where employees stop exercising initiative because past attempts were discouraged or punished. This atrophies judgment and decision-making capabilities, limiting future career options. Commitment cultures that encourage autonomy and provide developmental feedback build human capital, enhancing both organizational capability and individual employability. Khan, 1990. Finally, customer and community stakeholders experience indirect effects. Committed employees deliver qualitatively different customer interactions, more authentic, creative, and genuinely helpful rather than scripted and transactional. In healthcare, committed providers demonstrate greater empathy and communication quality, improving patient outcomes beyond clinical protocols. In education, committed teachers adapt pedagogy to student needs rather than rigidly following curriculum. These stakeholder impacts extend organizational culture's reach beyond employment relationships. Evidence-based organizational responses, transparent and authentic communication strategies. Communication transparency forms the foundation of commitment cultures by building trust, reducing uncertainty, and signaling respect for employee judgment. Research by Men, 2014, found that transparent internal communication significantly predicted both employee-organization relationships and organizational identification, key commitment precursors. The mechanism operates through reducing information asymmetry that otherwise triggers suspicion and defensive compliance. Effective transparency extends beyond simply sharing information to ensuring accessibility, context, and two-way dialogue. Leaders must explain not just what decisions were made but why, the reasoning, trade-offs, and constraints involved. This rationale sharing helps employees understand organizational logic even when disagreeing with specific choices, maintaining commitment through disagreements that would fracture compliance-based relationships. Practical approaches for building transparent communication. Regular town halls with substantive Q&A sessions addressing employee concerns, transparent decision-making criteria and frameworks guiding major choices, financial open book management with training to interpret business metrics, strategy visualization, making plans accessible with competitive context, leadership accessibility through skip-level meetings and office hours, post-decision debriefs explaining considerations and rejected alternatives. Patagonia exemplifies transparent communication as a commitment driver. The outdoor apparel company shares detailed information about its supply chain, including factory locations, working conditions, and environmental impacts, information most competitors guard closely. This transparency extended to admitting mistakes publicly and inviting employee input on corrections. The result is exceptionally high employee commitment, with turnover rates far below industry averages and employees frequently making personal sacrifices to support company environmental missions. Procedural justice and fair process. Procedural justice, the perceived fairness of decision-making processes, powerfully influences commitment even when outcomes disappoint individuals. Research demonstrates that people accept unfavorable outcomes when they perceive the process as fair, but resist even favorable outcomes from unjust processes. This finding has profound implications. Organizations can build commitment despite resource constraints or competitive pressures if they implement fair procedures. Fair processes share common characteristics: voice, opportunity for input before decisions. Consistency, similar cases handled similarly, bias suppression, decision-makers free from self-interest. Accuracy, good information, correctability, ability to appeal. And ethicality, adherence to moral standards. Transparency and explanation prove critical. People must understand the process and receive rationale for decisions. The commitment mechanism operates through identity and respect. Fair processes communicate that employees are valued organizational members whose perspectives matter, not interchangeable units to be directed. This respect fulfills fundamental needs for dignity and inclusion, generating effective commitment independent of specific outcomes. Implementation strategies for procedural justice. Structured voice mechanisms for employee input before major decisions. Consistent policy application audited across departments and levels. Independent appeals processes for grievances and decisions. Participative goal setting involving employees in objective setting. Transparent criteria for rewards, promotions and recognition. Explanation requirements for decisions affecting employees. DA Vita, the kidney dialysis provider, built commitment through procedural justice despite working conditions that might suggest compliance approaches, clinical protocols, regulatory requirements, and emotionally demanding patient care. The company implemented town hall governance structures where frontline staff participate in operational decisions affecting their facilities. Treatment center administrators cannot make major scheduling, staffing, or protocol changes without structured input from care teams. This voice and explanation, even in a highly regulated context, generated exceptional commitment, with employee satisfaction scores in the top decile of healthcare organizations. Capability building and developmental culture organizations genuinely committed to employee development, not just training compliance, create powerful commitment bonds. When organizations invest in employee capabilities, particularly skills applicable beyond the current role, employees reciprocate with commitment and effort. Kuvars and Disvik. 2009. The investment signals that employees are valued for their potential, not just current productivity. Developmental cultures differ fundamentally from training programs. Training ensures compliance with current role requirements. Development prepares people for future challenges, often in different roles or even organizations. This future orientation requires confidence that capable employees will stay and contribute, while paradoxically making staying more attractive by expanding possibilities. Learning cultures also embrace failure as information rather than error requiring punishment. Edmondson, 2019, demonstrated that psychological safety, the belief that interpersonal risks like admitting mistakes or asking questions won't be punished, enables the experimentation underlying both innovation and learning. Compliance cultures cannot provide psychological safety, as they depend on error avoidance and sanction threats. Developmental approaches fostering commitment. Individualized development plans focused on employee aspirations, cross-functional rotations, building broader perspective, tuition reimbursement without service lock-in requirements, mentoring programs, pairing employees with senior guides, conference participation, funding external learning, internal talent marketplaces enabling exploration and movement, stretch assignments offering supported challenge. AT&T faced a dramatic capability challenge as telecommunications shifted from hardware to software and services, rather than replacing existing employees with new talent. The company invested over $1 billion in reskilling its workforce. The Future Ready initiative offered employees personalized learning paths, online courses, nanodegrees in emerging technologies, and tuition assistance for external education. Critically, AT&T made these opportunities available without requiring commitments to stay, signaling genuine investment in people. Over 140,000 employees participated, and internal surveys showed that development opportunities became the top driver of employee satisfaction, surpassing compensation. Autonomy-supportive leadership and distributed authority leadership style fundamentally determines whether organizations foster commitment or compliance. Autonomy-supportive leadership, providing choice, rationale, and acknowledgement of employee perspectives, predicts commitment. Intrinsic motivation and performance, while controlling leadership, predicts compliance at best and resistance at worst. Deci et al. 1989. The challenge lies in implementation. Many leaders intellectually endorse autonomy while behaviorally controlling decisions through habit or anxiety. Distributed authority represents the structural manifestation of autonomy-supportive leadership, rather than concentrating decision rights at senior levels. Commitment cultures push authority to the periphery where information resides and implementation occurs. This distribution requires confidence in employee judgment, developed through capability building and reinforced through fair processes. The evidence is compelling. A meta-analysis by Humphrey et al. 2007 found that job autonomy correlated with job satisfaction, ρ equals 39, internal work motivation, ρ equals 43, and performance, ρ equals 18. The performance effect, while smaller, proves economically significant at scale. More importantly, autonomy's performance impact increases in complex Uncertain environments where centralized decision-making cannot adapt quickly enough. Practices for increasing autonomy and distributing authority. Outcome rather than process accountability, systematic elimination of unnecessary approvals, participative strategy development including frontline voices, team-level resource allocation, discretion, self-managed teams with internal authority, explicit decision-making frameworks and authority assignment, error tolerance policies, distinguishing acceptable failures. W.L. Gore, manufacturer of Gore-Tex and other advanced materials. Built commitment through radical authority distribution. The company operates without traditional hierarchy, job titles, or formal managers. Instead, associates make commitments to projects and teams, with leadership emerging based on demonstrated capability. New product development occurs through associates securing colleague commitments to promising ideas rather than seeking management approval. The commitment payoff is substantial. Gore consistently ranks among the best companies to work for, with extremely low turnover and innovation productivity exceeding competitors with traditional structures. Purpose activation and meaningful work design. Meaningful work, activity contributing to valued purposes beyond instrumental rewards, generates the deepest commitment. Research by Steger et al. 2012 found that meaningful work predicted job satisfaction, organizational commitment, and life satisfaction, with effects persisting even controlling for other job characteristics. The mechanism involves identity, when work contributes to purposes aligned with personal values. Professional and personal identities integrate rather than conflict. Organizations don't create meaning directly, individuals construct it through interpretation. However, leaders shape conditions, making meaningful interpretations more accessible. This occurs through highlighting work's contribution to valued outcomes, connecting employees with beneficiaries who articulate impact, and providing autonomy, enabling employees to craft aspects of their work toward personally meaningful purposes. The beneficiary contact intervention proves particularly powerful. Grant, 2007. Found that fundraisers who spent 5 minutes meeting scholarship recipients subsequently increased fundraising output by 171% and time on the phone by 142%. The brief contact made abstract purpose concrete and emotional, enhancing commitment to the task. Approaches for enhancing perceived meaningfulness. Purpose articulation beyond profit in stakeholder impact terms, beneficiary connection programs linking employees with those they serve, impact measurement and communication, quantifying valued contributions, values-aligned project selection, considering mission alongside financials, line of sight management, connecting individual roles to ultimate impact, job crafting, encouragement, allowing personalized meaning making, regular meaning focused conversations in one-on-ones. Medtronic, the medical device manufacturer, built powerful commitment through purpose activation despite operating in a highly technical, regulated industry requiring substantial procedural compliance. The company regularly invites patients whose lives were saved or improved by Medtronic devices to speak at employee gatherings, sharing personal stories of impact. Engineering teams developing new devices meet with patients who will eventually use their products, making abstract specifications personally meaningful. Employee surveys consistently showed that sense of purpose and meaning ranked as top drivers of engagement. And the company maintained turnover rates significantly below industry averages while achieving market-leading innovation. Building long-term organizational commitments, psychological contract evolution and reciprocity. The psychological contract, unwritten beliefs about reciprocal obligations between employees and organizations, has fundamentally shifted from transactional, fair pay for adequate performance, to relational, mutual investment in development, shared purpose, and long-term relationship. Yet many organizational practices reflect outdated transactional assumptions, creating contract breaches that undermine commitment. Rousseau, 1995. Building sustainable commitment requires consciously recalibrating psychological contracts around new reciprocity norms. Organizations must deliver on implicit promises about meaningful work, development opportunities, fair treatment, and purpose-driven culture. Employees reciprocate with discretionary effort, innovation, and commitment beyond contractual minimums. This virtuous cycle strengthens over time as both parties honor commitments, building trust that enables additional investment. The challenge lies in heterogeneity. Employees hold different expectations and value different organizational offerings. Idiosyncratic deals, where organizations customize arrangements to individual employee needs and circumstances, can strengthen commitment if perceived as fair. Russo et al. 2006. However, excessive customization risks creating perceptions of favoritism. The solution involves transparent principles for customization that permit flexibility within fair frameworks. Strategies for healthy psychological contract evolution. Explicit mutual expectation discussions during onboarding and annually employment value proposition clarity about offerings and expectations breach recognition and repair when changes prevent delivering. Promises lifecycle flexibility adapting to employee life stages within fairness frameworks psychological ownership cultivation through influence and authorship opportunities distributed leadership and collective ownership traditional. Hierarchical leadership concentrates authority and responsibility at the apex, with lower levels executing directives. This structure may enable compliance but inherently limits commitment. People commit most deeply to endeavors they help shape and control. Distributed leadership, where leadership functions occur throughout the organization, enables broader ownership and collective commitment. Distributed leadership doesn't mean eliminating hierarchy entirely. Rather, it recognizes that different individuals hold relevant expertise, relationships, and contextual knowledge for different challenges. Formal leaders create conditions enabling leadership emergence while providing ultimate coordination. This requires identity shifts for both formal leaders, from decision-makers to enablers, and employees, from executors to contributors. The commitment mechanism operates through ownership psychology. When employees influence strategic choices, solve complex problems, and lead initiatives, they develop psychological ownership, feeling the organization is ours rather than theirs. This ownership predicts commitment, citizenship behaviors, and performance beyond economic ties. Pierce et al. 2001. Mechanisms for distributing leadership and fostering ownership. Strategy co-creation involving cross-hierarchical groups rotating leadership roles across team members peer accountability systems for performance and norms open allocation models for self-selected projects. Transparent delegation through decision rights matrices universal leadership development regardless of formal role Horf Group, a German media and software company, transformed from traditional hierarchy to distributed authority by eliminating formal management positions and organizing around self-managed circles with specific purposes and accountabilities. Employees join circles based on interests and needed contributions, with roles and authority distributed through transparent processes. Strategic priorities emerge through company-wide dialogue rather than executive determination. Financial performance improved as decision-making accelerated and innovation increased. Voluntary turnover dropped to nearly zero, and employee engagement scores reached top percentile across benchmarks, with employees reporting genuine ownership of organizational success. Continuous learning systems and adaptive capacity static organizations require compliance. Employees execute established procedures correctly. Dynamic organizations require commitment. Employees continuously adapt capabilities and approaches as conditions evolve. Building this adaptive capacity demands embedding learning into organizational routines, not treating it as separate from productive work. Edmondson. 2019. Learning organizations share common characteristics: psychological safety enabling experimentation, systematic reflection on successes and failures, knowledge capture and sharing mechanisms, and leadership that models learning behaviors. These characteristics enable organizations to sense environmental changes, generate innovative responses, and reconfigure capabilities faster than competitors. Thies. 2007. The commitment connection is straightforward. Employees who continuously develop capabilities, contribute to organizational learning, and see their input shaping organizational evolution develop deep commitment to the collective enterprise. Learning becomes intrinsically motivating while simultaneously building organizational capability, creating alignment between individual and collective interests. Practices embedding continuous learning and adaptation. After-action reviews capturing and sharing lessons from projects, experimentation protocols treating intelligent failures as learning investments, knowledge management systems documenting expertise and best practices, cross-pollination through rotations and communities of practice, learning metrics celebrating experiments, lessons, and improvements, reflection time allocation for learning alongside productive output, external learning integration from customers, competitors, and research. Pixar Animation Studios built exceptional commitment through embedding learning into its creative process despite intense deadline and budget pressures. The company institutionalized dailies, daily work-in-progress reviews where animators show unfinished work and receive candid feedback from peers and directors. These sessions require psychological safety and build collective craft knowledge. Additionally, Pixar conducts extensive postmortems after each film, examining what worked and what didn't, with insights captured in detailed reports shared across the studio. This learning orientation creates commitment that far exceeds what financial incentives could achieve. Artists push boundaries and invest discretionary effort because they are building collective capability, not just completing assignments. Conclusion: the choice between commitment and compliance cultures is not simply philosophical, it produces measurable differences in organizational performance, innovation capacity, employee well-being, and long-term sustainability. While compliance approaches offer short-term predictability and control, they increasingly fail in knowledge-intensive, dynamic competitive environments requiring adaptability, creativity, and discretionary effort. Building commitment cultures demands systematic changes across multiple organizational systems, communication practices that build trust through transparency, fair processes that respect employee voice and dignity, developmental investments signaling genuine employee valuation, autonomy-supportive leadership distributing authority to those with relevant knowledge, and purpose activation connecting work to meaningful outcomes. These interventions reinforce each other, creating coherent cultures where commitment logically follows from organizational practices. The evidence base is compelling. Organizations that successfully cultivate commitment outperform compliance-oriented competitors across financial, operational, and stakeholder metrics. Companies like Patagonia, DA Vita, AT&T, W.L. Gore, Medtronic, Hoff Group, and Pixar demonstrate that commitment cultures succeed across diverse industries: apparel, healthcare, telecommunications, manufacturing, media, suggesting broad applicability beyond narrow contexts. Yet the transition from compliance to commitment requires courage and patience. Leaders must surrender some control, tolerate increased ambiguity, and invest in capabilities and culture with payoffs that emerge gradually rather than immediately. Organizations must address deeply embedded assumptions about human nature, whether employees are fundamentally self-interested and require external control, or whether they seek meaning and will contribute creatively when organizational conditions support rather than constrain. The practical path forward involves starting where possible, learning systematically, and expanding as evidence accumulates. Organizations need not transform comprehensively overnight. Implementing transparent communication in one division, distributing authority over one decision domain, or connecting one employee group with beneficiaries can demonstrate commitment's viability while building capabilities for broader change. These experiments, conducted with rigor and reflection, provide organization-specific evidence supplementing research literature. Ultimately, commitment cultures succeed not through sophisticated techniques but through authentic relationships grounded in mutual respect, shared purpose, and reciprocal investment. When organizations genuinely value employees as capable adults rather than resources requiring control, and when employees respond to that trust with discretionary effort and innovation, both parties benefit in ways compliance relationships can never achieve.